Hey everyone, welcome to the syllabus video. The goal here of this syllabus video is to give you a feel for what we would do on the first day in a physical class. We'd run through the parameters of the syllabus. The syllabus will tell you, and this video will tell you, the assignments that we'll be doing in the class, what the nature of the class is, what the stuff is that we'll be studying, and also it will tell you a little bit about me. So let's get started. Let's get cranking. Our class is of Philosophy 11, Critical Thinking, and in order to demonstrate what this class is really about, our first quote in the syllabus comes from a Mexican philosopher, Jose Vasconcelos, and I want to thank Professor Garcia for helping me translate this text. I got it out in my pidgin Spanish, but it really wasn't adequate. So the quote is, "Only books will lift this country out of ignorant cruelty." And the idea here is that there's something about education that makes you as a person less like maybe an animal, or less ignorant or less cruel and more enlightened, both as to the nature of your own life as well as other people. And that's kind of our goal here. The idea goes way back to the Greeks that education is the pathway to your life. Now, look, lots of people have wonderful lives and they don't go through formal education. But the nice thing about education, it doesn't just have to be about getting a job. You can also remember things and take things from the class. I've taken a lot of classes in my life, and I still remember particular things about that a professor said or did, and so that's kind of hopefully you'll take something away from this class. So before we move forward on the subject matter, let's talk about what everybody wants to know: your grade. What am I going to be tested on in this course? What do I need to do, and how will my grade be computed? There are three big parts to your grade. The biggest part, half of that pie, 50% of your grade, comes from quizzes. Now, these quizzes come about when you watch a video of me talking about something, you review the notes for that lecture, and then boom, you take an online quiz that asks you a series of questions, multiple choice. Sometimes there are short answers, and then as you complete those, you move through the course. So that's a big part of the class. The quizzes are largely straightforward, and that's sort of half of your grade. Now, the remaining half of your grade has to do with your paper, which we'll get to later, but it is a paper about a paranormal topic. And I will give you the format for that paper, how you'll write it. It has a specific format. You'll have a roadmap paragraph with a thesis statement and so forth. The other part of this class is your presentation. Now, this class does not meet in person. It is an online class. So when I say presentation, I mean that you will generate a PowerPoint or Google Slides, and you'll send me the link, or you'll send me the PDF of the presentation, and that will be 25% of your grade. I will tell you exactly how you'll be graded there, right? So what are the criteria for getting an A, and that we'll get to that when the assignment is posted. And that's typically done towards the end of the class, but it is not due on the last day of class. And the reason why is you want to get it done quickly. You'll notice that it's your presentation is 25% of your grade, and the paper is 25% of your grade. So if you don't get the presentation in, or you don't do it, or you don't get the paper in, or you don't do it, that's 25% of your grade. So even if everything else was perfect, your quizzes were 100%, your paper was 100%, you'd still only get a C in the class. And so the presentation, keep in mind, is not due the last day of class. It's due before that. This is so that you get it in beforehand, and I'm pretty ironclad on that. Okay, so this is our grading scale. This is, as you can tell, there are no pluses or minuses. This is something that is dictated by Long Beach City College. So even if I really feel like you did a great job and you should get an A- instead of a B+, I can't do it. You will get an A or a B, and where it falls is where it falls. Now, the nice thing about Canvas is that you can check your grade immediately in most cases. Sometimes there are quizzes that have short answers and you can't, I have to grade those. Sometimes you'll be turning in a presentation or a paper and that grade won't populate. right away. But generally speaking, you can get a pretty fair idea as to how you're doing by looking at your grade immediately through Canvas. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. Look at your grade frequently and often, and if you have any questions, let me know. Okay, breaking it up, let's go to another quote. This is one of my favorites. It's from Mary Wollstonecraft, and she says, "The being cannot be termed rational or virtuous who obeys any authority but that of reason." And the idea here is, in order to be a rational person or to be a virtuous person, you really need to be able to reason and use your mind as opposed to just your base impulses or your prejudices or your ignorances, if that makes sense, that last line. The hope is that, and we'll get into this later when we talk about logic, but if someone is prejudiced or ignorant, that prejudiceness, that ignorance will never correct itself. They will simply stay that same way. But when you use reason, you can convince people of your position and demonstrate for them why you are correct. You can show one another, right? It's social. You can show one another why your reasoning is correct or incorrect. Okay, moving on. Now, the next thing we've got here are the student learning outcomes for the course. I'm going to read these, but I don't know that they're going to make a ton of sense to you because you haven't taken the course yet. So, the student learning outcomes are: analyze arguments and components of arguments. You've probably heard of arguments before. Usually it means people are fighting or they're in an argument, right? Professor Vitt is sleeping on the couch. He's in an argument with his wife. Fair enough, but in critical thinking and philosophy, we mean something very specific by argument. We mean a sort of structure, something that has premises and conclusion, or conclusions, or something that we think, and then reasons we have for thinking that. And what we'll do in this course is learn how to analyze that, learn how to provide reasons to think the way that we do. The next thing, we will distinguish between examples of inductive arguments and deductive arguments. Again, you might be familiar with induction, you might be familiar with deduction, but if you're not, it's totally fine because we haven't gotten there yet and you don't need to know it. But very generally, the difference between these two kinds of arguments is the degree of support between the reasons you have for thinking something and the thing that you think. In other words, the difference between them is the degree of support between the premises and the conclusions. In deductive arguments, that support relationship is usually complete, and in inductive arguments, it's very strong. Or at least a better way to put it is, in a deductive argument, the arguer is intending to make that support relationship complete. Sometimes they don't always get there, though. But we'll get to that later. Don't worry about it. Next up, evaluating inductive arguments for strength, cogency, and or the presence of fallacies in speech or text. So it turns out, of the kinds of reasoning that we have available to us, induction is the one that we use most frequently. I wish we used deductive all the time. That's my favorite. I love it. But we don't. And so what happens is certain arguments like that have special traits that tell us that those arguments are good or bad. And that's what strength and cogency is. Fallacies, you'll see this bit right here, is a fancy word for saying mistakes in reasoning. It turns out that when we reason or we try to reason, we don't do it terribly well. And so we make mistakes. And in fact, we make the same sorts of mistakes over and over and over again. We do it so much, philosophers have come up for names for these things, and they're called fallacies. You might have heard the adjective fallacious, right? That's fallacious reasoning or something like that. I don't know if that's an adverb or an adjective, but it doesn't matter because it's not an English class, okay? The idea is if somebody says something is fallacious, that's a fallacious argument. It means you've made a mistake and there's no reason I should accept that argument because you've made a misstep in it. Okay, Roswell. This is one of my favorite topics. It's a great way to approach critical thinking, and we will use it to talk about the stuff that we've learned. Now, you might have never heard about Roswell before. In July of 1947, a rancher came across some very strange debris after an absolutely terrible thunderstorm the night before, and Ever since that time, there's been speculation that the United States government moved in and took the remnants of an artifact from outer space, and then the story goes from there. And we'll look at the evidence for this claim and whether or not we can believe it. Now, 1947 was a long time ago. It's almost 100 years ago. And it's funny to think of it now, but part of what's great about this topic is it allows us to address really extreme examples, otherwise known as extraordinary claims. Sometimes I'll use the phrase paranormal. We'll get to that in chapter 1. But the idea is we want to look at cases where our reasoning is stressed the most. These outlying cases where we are trying to think about things that are outside our ordinary experience. And if we know that our reasoning works well in those cases, then we can know that our reasoning works well in the more normal cases that we might have, say a political dispute or an economic policy or something like that. Also, it's a fun way to teach critical thinking without necessarily triggering people to such an extent that their learning is halted. Okay, next up, second sight. We'll address this at different points in the course, but the idea here is that some people claim to be able to perceive things without use of the normal senses. So they can read a book without opening it, or they can see the future. And the question is not, do you believe that, but what evidence do we have for thinking that it is true? What you'll find in this class is let me just pump the brakes there. We'll get to it. Memories. We'll also talk about, shows you how good my memory is, right? We'll also talk about perception. If you stare right there in the middle of that, you'll see it's kind of moving. It might make you dizzy or nauseous. You'll see that the way that we construct the world is not necessarily as clean-cut as you might normally think. And because of that, we can take the information from our senses and make bad beliefs from it. And so perception is something that we'll study in this class. It's also very close to cognition, the way that we think. And so if we can understand some of the errors in perception, there are sometimes analogs to how we reason. And if we can be aware of those things, then it makes us better thinkers. Memories, this is the one I was looking for before. We will study the psychological act of memory. And most people tend to think that their memories are pretty good. They remember things, they recall how something went. Actually, most people don't have very good memory. Memory isn't like a photograph. We tend to think of it as a photograph, but actually memory is an active process. And the way that you remember something that happened many years ago probably says something more about what's happening now or how things have transpired since than they do what happened in the original instance that you're recalling. Okay, a little break here. Just a motto for the course: control your mind, or someone else will. Really and truly, this is the case. Look, I want you to think for yourselves, and not just because I told you to. I'll be here all week. Try the veal. The idea, let me see if I can make this a bit teensy so you can see it all together. I should have done that earlier, but I just couldn't resist, right? I wanted the big, huge images. There we go. Control it. No, still won't do it. Come on, Professor Vitt. Get it together, man. 50%. Okay, there we go. Whoa, all that gray. Control your mind or someone else will. Look, what I want for you in this course is the development of your mind and all that entails. I want you to make up your own mind about things. So I want you to make up your own mind about Roswell. I want you to make up your own mind about politics and religion and cultures and all of that stuff. I can't do it for you. You shouldn't be appealing to what I say. That would be a fallacy. It would be an appeal to authority. Well, Professor Vitt studies this stuff a lot. What do you think about Roswell, Professor Vitt? It's irrelevant. I don't think that anything happened at Roswell, but my opinion is not important. Yours is. And the reality is I can't do anything to change your opinion about stuff. It's very difficult to change people's minds on things. but the one person who can change someone's mind is yourself. You can control your own mind and your own reasoning. You cannot control anyone else's. And so what I want for you out of this course is your own authentic sort of impulses about any number of the vast array of issues that you will encounter in your life. I don't want you to just regurgitate what you think I will say. All right, let's zoom back in here a little bit out of the pictures and into the course. Here we go. So this is Philosophy 11. This is a web course. We will not be meeting at all. Now, these are my normal office hours if you are taking this course during an interim session. So if this is the summer or this is the winter, I will not be on campus. These are my normal office hours for the regular term. So if you are taking this online for summer or for winter, I will not be at my office, but I am available to you, and I get to that right here, in Canvas on through the inbox. Now, you don't have to email me. Sometimes students will tell me, look, I cannot possibly email you every question I have. It's just too much. No problem. We'll set up a phone appointment, and I'm happy to talk to you, or if you want to FaceTime or something, or whatever, we can do that too. I'm here for you. I've done a lot of different things in my life, and this is the dream job for me. This is my dream career, by and away, not even close. And I love hearing from students. I don't mind it at all. So if you message me in Canvas, I will absolutely get back to you. So I'm not available for office hours in the summer and winter sessions, but I am in the normal sessions. So you can message me, you can leave a voicemail for me, but the best way to contact me is on Canvas. I'll reiterate that point. Okay, course catalog description. This class focuses on the improvement of practical reasoning skills. Students will be required to improve their reasoning skills and will learn to detect and avoid common argument fallacies. Students will develop the knowledge and habits needed to make decisions between conflicting ideas and beliefs. Applications are made to both contemporary and perennial issues, such as current political events, the news media, science versus pseudoscience, and capital punishment. Now, that's probably much of that is Greek to you unless you speak Greek, in which case it would be some other language that you don't speak. The general idea here is that, I'll give you the nugget. Years ago, there was an athlete named Deion Sanders, and Deion Sanders was famous for running a 4.1 440 40-yard dash backwards. Now, 4.1 would be a great time for someone normally, but to run backwards at that speed was just superhuman. And Deion Sanders had a very long career in the NFL, and I was watching one of his very last games. I don't even remember the team he was playing against, but I do remember the commentators talking about how there was a young rookie wide receiver, and he was very fast and quick, but he wasn't as savvy as Deion Sanders was. And the question was, will this rookie show up this veteran player, Deion Sanders? And it turned out after the game was over, and I'm sorry if you don't like sports, I apologize. After the game was over, the rookie didn't do very well at all. He didn't get one catch. And they interviewed the rookie after the game. They did interview Deion Sanders, but they asked the rookie, gosh, it seems like you guys were talking throughout the whole game. What was going on there? And this guy looked totally bewildered. I mean, he was just beside himself, and he shook his head and he said, I have never played a game like that in my life. It was amazing. It blew my mind. And the reporter said, what do you mean? And he said, the very first play, I ran a route. And at the end of the play, he said, I wasn't open. Somehow Deion Sanders knew the route I was going to run. At the end of the play, Deion Sanders said, hey, your third step out, you shifted your hips too early, so I knew you were running a slant or something like that, right? And every single play of the game, Deion Sanders told him what he did wrong, right? You looked the wrong way, you made the wrong read, you did this. And the guy said, so you can imagine, right? I mean, after doing this for an entire football game, you're just totally demoralized. You're trying to play against this person who knows just so much more about what's going on, and it's just very difficult. And the moral of that story is, look, you can be the fastest, strongest, quickest athlete, But unless you know the fundamentals of the game, you will not be a good player. And the same thing is true for thinking. The point of this course is not to get you to think a certain way about politics or religion or economics or any of that stuff or video games. It's to get you to think. And it's to get you to think the right way rather than make some of the most common errors that people make. And this happens. You will read somebody, they have a wonderful mind, but they've never formally looked at how to reason, how to appropriately think so that they have the right form as they're thinking. And that's the goal, right, for you guys. It's not to get you to think about biology or anthropology or physics any particular way. It's to get you to be aware of mistakes that people make in reasoning and the types of reasoning involved. So it's sort of like giving you the fundamentals, right, of what we're doing. All right, we covered student learning outcomes. Next up, required texts and materials. There is no textbook to buy for this course. I've taught this course for many, many years, and one thing that always broke my heart was that students would not be able to take the class because they couldn't buy the book, because the book was, some $60, $70, $80 and up book, and it was essentially the same book that people had been using for years, with maybe some minor adjustments, but it was a new edition and they had to buy it, or even if it wasn't a new edition, it was still very expensive. And so Long Beach City College gave me a grant which allowed me to employ some open source materials. So our open source textbook is available right there. I put it on a Google file for you. Now, the material that you're going to need for the course, I'm actually going to post for you. So you'll see it when I see read and review notes. If you recall the introductory video, I said, oh, here it says read and review notes. All of the questions that I ask are based off of those notes. So you might look at the textbook, but it will not be a necessary thing. Again, so this is an open source course, meaning open educational resources. You don't have to spend money in order to take the course. It really was tough to have students who couldn't do well in the course because they didn't have the course. That was very tough. Okay, course requirements, in other words, these are your grades. We'll be doing exams. That'll be 50% of your grade. The paper will be 25% of your grade. That'll be a 4 to 5 page paper, and that'll just be exhibiting arguments and analysis. Presentation will be 25% of your grade. You'll be presenting and analyzing arguments, looking for cognitive biases, evaluating evidence, and then you get to come down wherever you want on the story. So if you feel like, yes, there has been an artificial satellite orbiting the Earth for 3,000 years, then you get to say that. If you think there's chupacabra, you get to say that. I don't care where you come down. I care that you come down on one side or the other and you've engaged the arguments in the appropriate way. Heads up. I encourage you to submit both the paper and the presentation. Occasionally I have someone who just does, skips the paper or skips the presentation. They say, oh, I've got a 71%, going into the last exam. I'm not going to do the presentation because I'm already at a C. And then they don't do well on that last exam and they get a D, and then it's too late. Do all of the assignments because there are not that many of them, right? There's one paper and there's one presentation. And so if you miss one of those things, the best that you can possibly do is a C. And it would just break my heart to see that. So do both the paper and the presentation, even if you're taking it pass, no pass. It's important to do that. Sorry, I'm going to get a little drink of iced tea here. Sorry. Okay. Grading policy, I talked about that earlier. That's just LBCCs. There are no pluses and minuses. All right, primary course contact for me is Canvas. I check it every single day. Now, you can message me on email, rvid@lbcc.edu, but Canvas is better. It's better for a couple of reasons. Number one, I check it every day. Number two, it's exclusively devoted to student correspondence. So I have colleagues with whom I'm working on different committees for things, and sometimes those sorts of administrative exchanges, those sorts of things take a lot of time, but my primary focus is you folks. And so when I log into Canvas every day, I look and I complete every one of those messages. When you do email, there's just a huge number of things that come in, and it's much harder to keep track of. Now, I still respond to emails, of course. I'm not saying I don't, but the best way to contact me is on Canvas. I am also on social media. I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram. I guess what I would say is you don't need to follow me on social media, and I will get to this a little bit far below. Yeah, it's right down here. So this is a good lead in. Sorry. You don't need to follow me on Twitter. You don't need to follow me on Instagram, but you're welcome to. And if you follow me, I will hit follow back. And if you have a private account and you don't want me to follow you, but you want to follow me, that's fine. I don't mind at all. I understand, some people just use Instagram for friends and they don't want their professors, seeing all. That's fine, of course. It's no problem. But I will automatically hit follow back to you. And if you want me to follow you, great. If not, that's fine. I won't take it personal. It's totally okay. Twitter, I'm on Twitter. I don't know. It really depends, like anything, right? Sometimes I'm on it all the time. Sometimes don't look at it for a while. One thing that I do want to bring up, though, because you'd see it pretty quickly on Twitter, is my own bias. I tend to be socially pretty liberal. It's just been the nature of my life. Now, I went to a super conservative law school, and that was fantastic for me. I was able to have hour upon hour of really interesting public policy discussion and discussion about different Judeo-Christian traditions and how those things relate to our shared form of life. So I enjoyed sort of engaging people on those points, but I mention it because I've taken classes where the point of the class was that you were supposed to agree with the professor. And I just don't think that that's even remotely correct. That's just not education, right? That's propaganda. And what I want for you is what you want. And so I have students who are super liberal and they do super well in my class. And I have students who are super conservative and they do super well in my class. I have anarchists who do really well. I have libertarians who do really well. I have all different sorts of students with all different kinds of political and religious views. And what I want for you is the realization of your own beliefs and your own thoughts and actions. And I don't want you to feel like you need to mimic me or listen to what I say and then say, oh, Professor Vitt feels this way about this social issue, so I have to, or else he's not going to like me. Absolutely not. And I am by no means infallible. I mean, the stuff that I think has errors all throughout it. I'm not some perfect, genie that you can appeal. I'm just not. I get stuff wrong all the time. And part of the goal here is for me to learn. So I want you to know this because I mentioned that about that one particular thing. I don't share the rest of my views. The reason why I mention it is I don't want you to feel like you need to mimic me, right? That's important. I'm a member of something called the Heterodox Academy. What does that mean? It's an academy of thinkers who believe in diversity viewpoint. And so as a philosopher, this is really important to me. One of our first philosophers was Socrates, and he was killed for having a unique viewpoint. And I've seen time and again students feel uncomfortable voicing opinions, beliefs, whether they're religious or political or social or cultural or whatever, just because they feel like they're going to be persecuted or there's going to be some sort of adverse reaction to them. That's terrible. That's just so far from the truth. So in order to create a classroom environment that supports respectful, critical inquiry through the free exchange of ideas, the following principles will guide our work. Treat every member of the class with respect, even if you disagree with their opinion. Bring light, not heat. Reasonable minds can differ on any number of perspectives, opinions, and conclusions. Because constructive disagreement sharpens thinking, deepens understanding, and reveals novel insights, it is not just encouraged, it is expected. All viewpoints are welcome. No ideas are immune from scrutiny and debate. You will not be graded on your opinions. Look, some of my... my own opinions are so well informed by opposition, and you will never engage me on my opinions, but you will be engaging students on various topics. For instance, Roswell, you'll be forced to give an argument and then a counter argument. It's nothing personal. It's just that we have to get better at learning how to share our ideas in a constructive way. And the better that we are at doing that, the better off we all are. Just as we're better off, right, as a society, with you choosing the beliefs that are right for you and voicing them and articulating them, that's good for all of us, right? It's good for everyone if somebody voices their views and learns what they are, rather than just mimics what they think somebody else should be saying. All right, student freedom of speech. The California Education Code 48907 states, pupils of the public schools, including charter schools, shall have the right to exercise freedom of speech. I really believe in that. Now, when this course is taken in class, that's a little bit more of a daily thing, and we work on that. But it's true, too, when we're working on the discussion boards. All right, so, again, I get to teach you how to think. I don't get to teach you what to think, and I don't want to teach you what to think because I can't change your mind anyway. So don't feel like you need to change what you're thinking for my benefit. It's totally fine. Okay, note about dropping the course. I don't process drop requests. So sometimes a student will email me and say, Professor Vitt, I'm dropping the course. If you want to do that, you need to do that through admissions and records. I don't do it. So just emailing me and saying you want to drop will not get you to drop the course. You need to do that through them. Okay, class participation. This class proceeds on a modular basis, and once that module is finished, it's closed and there's no way to make it up. I know this sounds terrible, but it's the only way to get through these online classes. Because the class is set up in such a way that you can do it at 2 a.m. or you can do it at 9 a.m. or you can do it on a Monday or you can do it on a Saturday, right? It's sort of a self-paced course. Because you do stuff at your own time, I have to set very clear markers as to the last moment at which you can do something. Otherwise, people try to do everything in the last 2 weeks and it just becomes this terrible snowball. So once a module closes, boom, it's closed forever and I will not accept any makeups. So as soon as you can, as soon as that module opens, start the lecture, start the notes, get through it and get ready to take that quiz so you can be done and move on to something else. Content disclaimer. This course deals with many controversial topics relating to people's deeply held beliefs. As your instructor, my obligation and privilege is to teach you how to think rationally, argumentatively, and from evidence about your beliefs, not what to think about them. Your course grade does not depend upon what you believe. Moreover, the attitudes expressed in the textbook do not reflect those of Professor Vitt. Certain portions of the book will disregard entirely. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions or concerns. This is super important to me. Look, my job is to educate you. It's to teach you about argumentation and how this stuff works, right? So the intersection between politics and thinking, science and thinking, these sorts of things. It's not to tell you what your values are or how they're supposed to go or to proclaim that my values are more important. See, people are better when they're able to engage one another and they disagree because that is just a fundamental process that society needs to engage in. So if you ever feel like, hey, Professor Vitt, you're kind of shoving this down our throats and this is the way, please let me know. I am not I'm just a person. And so I'm not capable of forcing you to think a certain way, and I don't want to. I want for you your own beliefs and your own views. Okay, internet access. If you're watching this, you're seeing me on the internet, so you will need to have internet for this class, and you will need to be able to access the Canvas inbox. I'll message you when modules are opening up. I will message you if there's something wrong with the paper or I didn't get a submission, and you need to be able to respond to those things quickly. All right, students, current electronic email. Make sure that your email is current with Canvas. Occasionally it happens where a student says, oh gosh, the Canvas is set up to my dad's email and that's on his phone and he was gone he went to some place for the summer and I didn't know that you messaged me. It just cannot work that way. Just like I need to check my messages regularly to check in with you, you'll need to do the same also. So make sure that your email account is connected to Canvas in the right way. All right. Academic integrity and plagiarism. Okay, so typically this isn't too hard. I don't have too much of this, but occasionally it happens that a student is pushed for time and they feel the need to copy a blog, or they feel the need to copy some other paper that they find online and then present that work as their own. If you haven't worked in academia, then that might seem like a strange sort of, it might not seem like a big deal, but it's the worst thing you can do. The worst thing you can do is take someone else's work and present it as your own. That's what plagiarism really is. And so when this happens, it's just not justifiable, and that will invoke severe punishment, right? You will likely get an F on that. And some people think, well, gosh, Professor Vitt will never know. I'll just do it. It's very clear once you adopt someone else's writing style. It would be as if 7'6" Yao Ming walked into this room right now. It's very clear. Somebody's writing along. And then in July of 1947, Mac Brazel thought he saw something, and then, right, and then the writing changes completely. An intrusion from an extraterrestrial plane might have occurrenced this event because, and and it all changes. It all becomes totally different. And that's very obvious. And then remember, the same way that someone found that, you found that information, I can find it too. So I encourage you, write your own papers, do your own stuff. And by taking this class, you are saying you will not plagiarize. If you are having trouble with an assignment, by the way, people who normally plagiarize are not students who have like a D or an F and they're in danger of failing. It's usually the student that has an A or a B already and they just don't have time. If that's you, please contact me. I would much rather work with you on that than to have you get a low grade on it. Yeah, I mean, I can understand when things come up. Please message me. Don't feel like you need to just take someone else's work and present it as your own. All right, Student Success Centers. Now, this course is not held on campus. We will never meet in person. But I wanted to draw your attention to some of the resources that we have here at Long Beach City College. So there are PCC Student Success Centers and LAC Student Success Centers. And I encourage you to take advantage of those for academic tutoring. It's just super important. If you are someone, and I know I was like this when I started college, I was not a good student and I hadn't shown any particular interest in school generally. I was the person who would come home, I would do all the reading and be done, or do my homework in about 40 minutes and then sit and watch TV and get a B+, right? I was okay with that. My sister, by contrast, would come home and she would work the whole night through, just burning that oil. I mean, this is like high school, right? She would do this. And she'd get an A. She'd do super well in the class. And I just never had that inclination. It wasn't until I started college and I learned philosophy, I took a course in it, that I just fell in love with it. I just thought it was the most interesting thing I'd ever seen. Even when I made a mistake in philosophy, that was instructive. I was better when I made mistakes because I could learn what they were. I'd never seen anything like that before. And so whomever you are, whatever experiences you've had in the classroom before, leave those at the door. Everybody starts philosophy on the same level. It's new for everyone. And you may find that you absolutely love it. You may find you hate it. That's fine too. But I know for me, it really changed my personality. I wasn't somebody who was a reader before that. I wasn't somebody who was interested in those kinds of things, or so I thought. Then I discovered, oh my gosh, somebody else has been thinking about this stuff too. And so don't feel like your past history with academics is going to predict your performance in this class. It just won't. You can do well in this class, I assure you. Access services, DSP&S is wonderful stuff. And if you have been if you have been certified as having what's called a learning disability, really that's a terrible term. It's not really what it is. It's just that the brain is intensely complex, and it functions in different ways for different people. I mean, don't think about brains as all being the same. Every brain is a snowflake with its own unique neural structure. This is absolutely true. The research backs it. And so different brains process in different ways. And it could be that you've been processing a certain way for a super long time, and that way just doesn't work with this highly artificial structure that you have to deal with. And so I have students who need extra time on exams, or they need note-taking, or they need something like that. Contact DSPNS. I grew up with a guy who was dyslexic. And when he qualified for books on tape, that was books on tape back then, audiobooks for the blind, it changed his life. And within 6 months, everything changed for him. He had read a ton, and he loved learning, and but reading was real difficult for him, and it wasn't a pleasant experience, and writing was pretty much the same way. But once he was able to approach the material in a different way, it changed his life. And so I encourage you to look into that. Those people are there for you, and those services and accommodations are there for you. Veterans and eligible family members, if you are a veteran, thank you for your service to this country. I raise 2 beautiful boys because of you. My wife and I are together, and you've given so much to this country. Thank you. LBCC does have some veteran services, and there's a VA processing center in, that's not on campus. The Veterans Affairs office is located in E10, and you can call that number and get further information, or just look on the LBCC website. All right, Career and Job Services Center. Some of you, many of you, may be taking this course to get a job, ultimately a job. Absolutely. If you are trying to build towards a career in the meantime, please go to Career and Job Services Center. I have a friend who's an attorney. She just had her resume redone professionally, and the cost for doing that was over $1,000 just for her resume to be redone by somebody. People who work in Career and Job Services Center, they are paid by the college to work with you on that stuff. You're not sure how to write a cover letter or get your resume looked at? Contact them. They will help you. And it's there for you. Your tuition pays for that. Your taxes pay for that. So go, and I encourage you to take advantage of it. Okay, assignments. We'll do this in a separate video. We'll do the schedule of assignments in a separate video. But one thing that I wanted to let you know is that the schedule there will be tentative, meaning something may change. Now, here's the deal when I say something may change. I will never make a deadline sooner. I will never shorten the amount of time you have to do something. The only thing I will do is lengthen it. So if something comes up and I'm getting a bunch of messages from folks and they say, look, the logic module is killing me, I need another week, well then, boom, we'll do that, and I'll extend the deadline for you. I will never shorten it, and I will never penalize you for anything. Late assignment policy, there are no makeup assignments. So once the module closes, it's closed. Discipline policy, I don't think we'll have too much of a problem in here. There is some discussion boards. The general idea is that we are all old enough to understand when someone is being disruptive or behaving outside of the norms. And when that happens, it disrupts how other people learn, and we cannot have that. We have to have a stable learning environment. Okay, and this is very similar here. Classroom decorum online. Any behavior which upsets the teaching or learning atmosphere of the class is not acceptable, and students who engage in such behavior will be removed from the class. That's never happened. People have had some disagreements and things have gotten heated, but no one's ever been removed. But it's a possibility if behavior is just so over the top, right? Academic freedom. Some of the discussions, the essays, the topics will include the use of objectional language and adult topics as long as it's pertinent to the learning process. You'll be exposed to language or ideas that are in conflict with your personal worldview. You're expected to maintain a mature and courteous demeanor during class discussions. Disrespectful behavior will not be tolerated. All right. Class attendance. This is a fast-paced course. and so you need to get stuff done when it is assigned. Okay, general guidelines and information. Spelling, grammar, and punctuation always counts towards or against your grade. So if you, when you write a text to a friend, you probably don't use proper punctuation. That's not unusual in any sense. But when you're turning in a college paper, and if you have a contraction in there, so instead of writing do not, you write don't. Well, in a paper, you need to be more formal and remove the contractions. People who write books, novels and stuff, they use contractions all the time. But when you're writing an academic paper, you want to remove those things. So I can be very understanding when it comes to spelling and grammar. I make all sorts of mistakes myself. So I'll give you some leeway. But when things are too far over, particularly when things begin to be so, when the paper has so many spelling and grammatical errors that it can't express the ideas, it inhibits the errors, inhibit the communication of ideas. When that happens, then it definitely will have a big impact on your grades. So do your best to proof your papers, and if you have difficulty with that or you want some help on that, go to the Student Success Center and they will help you. Okay, I know that was a super long video. You will now watch the class schedule video, and hopefully that will get you on the way. Just a quick side note as to who I am. I'm licensed to practice law in the state of California. I started life as a philosopher, and then in graduate school I left. I got my master's, and then I went to law school. I felt that I wanted to do that instead. And then after I had become an attorney and I've been practicing for a few years, I was unhappy, and a friend needed a class taught, and I taught that class, and dang it, my gosh, it was almost immediately, I think it was the second class, I realized, I should have never left philosophy. So my wife had married an attorney, and with her support, I decided to come back to academics and become a philosophy professor, or try to anyway. And I was fortunate enough to do it. So why does this matter? You want to get on to the next video. I get it. Here's why it matters. I am doing exactly what I want to do with my life. I got to choose twice. I wanted to be a professor, and then I changed my mind. I wanted to be an attorney. I did that, and then I went back to being a professor. Most people don't get to pick the first time. And so I understand all too well how valuable your time is, and how important it is that you get a response from your professor, that you get meaningful feedback on your assignments. And I really and truly understand how important it is that you don't get a professor who mails it in. I will never mail it in for you. I will always give you 110% in this class. And if you ever feel like I'm not giving it, please let me know, and I will do my darndest to double down and work even harder. Your success really matters to me, because I've done things with my life that weren't very meaningful. They weren't super pleasant. I see this as a collaborative process where we can work together towards getting you a fantastic grade and learning something along the way. If everybody got an A, well, dang it, everybody gets an A. That's fantastic. But it matters to me that you learn and you pull something meaningful and deep from the material. So please do not ever hesitate to let me know if you have a question or a concern, a comment. I'm absolutely overjoyed to hear from you, because I really am super duper uber lucky to be able to have this job. Okay, listen, I'm looking forward to everything. Go ahead and move on to the next video, which is the course framework.